Hello and welcome to another Numbers Game Premier League preview for the 25-26 season. And I am excited to be talking about the Reds today. We're talking about all things Liverpool, and we've got a great guest on. We've got a resident Liverpool expert in Matt Addison. So Matt, tell us why you're such a good person to have on to talk about the Reds.
So I work for a company called Reach. I used to work for the Liverpool Echo, and I work for a website called Liverpool.com. And I'm a reporter covering Liverpool, really. So my day-to-day job is mainly writing, but a little bit of podcasts and video and a lot of travelling up and down the country, watching Liverpool play, press conferences, all that kind of thing, really. Pretty much every angle, whether it's the men's team, the women's team, the youth team, in whatever format you can think of that you can consume media. I will probably have done something or other on that at some point in the not too distant past. So try and keep on top of it all. And it's a particularly exciting summer, I think, to talk about Liverpool. It couldn't really be a better time to record something like this.
Well, I was going to say as well, you were living the dream, with your club there, you get to talk about them all the time, and what a great time to be talking about them. But let's take it back to the 24-25 season. It was pretty spectacular. Arne Slot's first season, not much could go better than the way it went out.
Yeah, I mean, to come in and hit the ground running as Arne Slot did, I think is a huge credit to how he's taken on that job. I think probably everybody assumed that there would be a drop-off and a decline after Jurgen Klopp left, but quite the opposite. They got better, they improved, refined a lot of things. They made certain elements a little bit tighter and a little bit stronger. They improved their injury record and obviously won the Premier League title by quite a distance in the end, 4 games to spare. It probably could have been more had it needed to be for Liverpool. It was just the perfect season, really. They were unfortunate in the Champions League to get PSG so early. If they hadn't, then it would have been a longer run in Europe as well. In terms of a start, I'm sure I'm not the only one who didn't really know anything about Arne Slot when the links with him first came, but Liverpool have clearly scouted perfectly in terms of that. He couldn't be a better fit, I don't think, for what came after Jurgen Klopp. They needed somebody who was in a similar mould and played similar football, but was obviously bold enough and confident enough to be his own person. And I think we've definitely seen that. He was a little bit more reserved at the start of the season, but obviously as his influence and confidence in his own ability has increased and improved across the course of the campaign, picking up more wins and sort of proving himself week in, week out. Really, it just feels normal now, which I think for a year of post Jurgen Klopp, for it to sort of feel normal and for the first Premier League title to be in the bag under Arne Slot, I think is it's a testament really to how good a coach he is and how much of a perfect fit stylistically in terms of his own personality as well it is for Liverpool.
How much of Slot's success do you think is down to kind of foundations laid by Klopp, or does Slot get all the credit this season, do you think?
I think there has to be some element of Jurgen Klopp taking some of the praise. Obviously, it was him who revamped Liverpool's midfield in 2023. They were in dire need. They just left it too long, really, and went too long with the likes of Jordan Henderson, Fabinho, and he basically chose and picked the players to come in. And obviously Dominic Szoboszlai was excellent last season. Alexis McAllister, I think, is quietly one of the best midfielders in the world. I don't think he gets enough praise, really, in terms of the quality that he's got. So I think Jurgen Klopp obviously put the foundations in place, but at the same time, I would say Arne Slot deserves a lot of credit for not ripping it up and starting again. Obviously, his philosophy and his style of play wasn't particularly different from what Jurgen Klopp does. I think we possibly might see a little bit more of a change this summer. I think Liverpool and Arne Slot deserve a lot of credit for not changing too much. The fact that they've gone for a manager who plays a similar way is no coincidence. The fact that they only signed Federico Chiesa, who basically didn't exist for most of last season because he wasn't available, it all just sort of builds into this continuity, which I think is a big thing. Liverpool were on the trajectory and on the way up under Jurgen Klopp, and so why change a winning formula too much? Obviously, Arne Slot was confident in himself to just go, you know what, it's working really. Liverpool came third in Jurgen Klopp's last season, and the last month of that season didn't go well, but up until that point, they were right in the title race. It was only a couple of results that that stopped them going all the way. I think they were 6 or 7 points off, Man City in the end, who won it.
Yeah, now I do want to bring up a sad topic and something that really overshadowed the Premier League win is the heartbreaking loss of Diogo Jota. Could you share some of your favourite memories of him and kind of look at the wonderful moments that he brought to your club and to the people of Liverpool as well?
Yeah, it's so hard to sum up, really. I mean, it still doesn't quite feel real that it happened. Obviously, there's still players coming back from, pre-season and summer breaks and things like that. And you're almost still waiting for Diogo Jota to be one of those who's reintegrated into the club and, looking ahead to next season. So, yeah, it's incredibly sad, incredibly difficult. It was a really tough couple of days to have to write and talk about that. It's not something that has ever really happened before. I can't really think of a scenario, certainly in the modern era, where something like that's happened. And, to do that in a sort of sensitive way is very, very difficult. I think Liverpool have done an incredible job, really, in the circumstances. A lot of the people who've had to make decisions around those kind of things would have known Diogo Jota really well and have had that personal relationship with him. So, to be able to handle a situation like that as well as they have, I think is hugely impressive. But yeah, in terms of a player, I mean, he was another one I mentioned before that McAllister, I think, is underrated. I think Diogo Jota was underrated as well. The injuries to some extent hindered him at times, but I think, his goal scoring record speaks for itself. The fact that he could score all types of goals. There was some tributes outside Anfield along the lines of, I can't remember exactly what the banner or the saying is at Anfield, but it's basically just bring Jota on. It's basically what people said when he was on the bench and Liverpool needed a goal. He was the one that you would turn to and essentially just know that you could put him in any situation. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure there's any rhyme or reason to it, but one of the goals that sticks out to me was away at Nottingham Forest. Him and Costas Tsimikas came on at the same time last season, and instantly Tsimikas puts in the corner and Jota heads it home. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't clean, it wasn't a 30-yard screamer of a goal, but it was just exactly what Liverpool needed at that particular moment in time. The other one that stands out, his last goal for Liverpool against Everton, was just the archetypal Diogo Jota goal, really, where he feints to go one way, goes the other. Somehow the goalkeeper manages to dive the wrong way. I don't know quite how he manages to do that on a regular basis, but there's so many goals where he just sort of puts the ball in the middle and the goalkeeper goes the wrong way. And I don't know how, I don't know, why he's managed to do that, but there's got to be some sort of, element of skill. And he was a great player. He was a great guy as well, by all accounts, behind the scenes. I don't know what the impact is going to be for Liverpool. I think it's been really nice that Liverpool have got on their website, goalkeepers, defenders, midfielders, attackers, and then just a new section at the bottom which just says forever and then Diogo Jota. So yeah, it's going to be tough, I think, at the start of next season. Once Liverpool get back into Anfield and it starts to feel real again, it's going to still be very raw for the fans and for the players.
So let's turn our attention back to the 24-25 season. And, obviously you've waxed lyrical there and said all the positives, but there has to be some areas needing improvement. So what do you think are the areas that needed improving, looking at that campaign?
I think it's hard to assess in terms of the Champions League because Liverpool were knocked out by PSG, who I think were the best team in it by a distance. I think Arne Slot mentioned a few times that week Liverpool played PSG in the Champions League. They also had the Carabao Cup final against Newcastle where they didn't look particularly fresh. And I think that was the big thing, really, that Jurgen Klopp would be quite happy to make 11 changes for a midweek game and just see what happened, and quite often it paid off for him. Arne Slot was a little bit less in terms of the rotations, I think probably because he didn't quite trust that he had the understudies. So I think depth is definitely one thing that Liverpool needed. I think they've definitely gone a long way to rectifying that with Florian Wirtz coming in. That means that maybe Dominic Szoboszlai can maybe play a little bit of the minutes that McAllister and Ryan Gravenberch played, and suddenly there's an extra option in that midfield. A little bit of extra freshness across the course of the campaign. It was literally 2 or 3 games where Liverpool needed it. A couple against Newcastle, as at St James's Park, when Liverpool looked a little bit tired in that one. They almost won that, and it was only a goalkeeper mistake near the end that made it 3-3. But in that game, you could see that Newcastle's midfield was just stronger and physically able to take them. So that's kind of the main thing, really, is just adding a couple of extra options in there to be able to rotate a little bit more, to keep everybody fresh. The injury situation improved a lot last season. Liverpool didn't really get as many injuries as what they'd had before. I think possibly that's a little bit down to the style being a little bit less end-to-end and intense. But that's the main thing, really. I think if Liverpool can keep the injuries the same as what they were last season, but add a couple of extra quality options, maybe one or two of those players that were guaranteed starters become rotation options and improve that way. But obviously Trent has moved on as well, was a unique player. There's been more churn than you'd imagine for a team that just sort of needed refinements rather than wholesale changes. But I think Liverpool were in a position where they just needed to add a little bit more quality in a couple of areas. But so far this summer, it does look like they've done that.
It's funny that, to me, spending 110 million or whatever Verts ended up being, and the most drastic change in terms of style and where we can expect to see tactical changes is probably at right back, isn't it? Where I think you spent 30 million on Frimpong, but Trent is like a one-of-a-kind type player that you're obviously never going to try and replace him, but that'll be the most interesting in terms of stylistic changes. Could even be for the better, like, despite how good, I absolutely love Trent as a player, but in terms of fitting in as a whole, Frimpong could help that team. Do you think it will make a massive difference to the style of play?
I think it will. I don't necessarily think it'll be Frimpong that starts the season. I think Conor Bradley is exceptional. I think those two, I struggle to see a proper number one in terms of the season. I think it might be that, if Liverpool play 2 games a week, most weeks, it might be that one plays one and one gets the other, and they just sort of split the minutes almost as close to 50-50 as you can get. But you're right to say that Trent is unique, and obviously Liverpool are going to have to find a way of changing that. But obviously Florian Wirtz is very creative, and they didn't really have a number 10 of that kind of mould, so maybe the creative focus just shifts to there. Obviously Milos Kerkez at left back probably is a younger version of Andy Robertson. Andy Robertson didn't have the best season last season. If you can have somebody like him who can physically get up and down the pitch and be able to create a little bit more from that side, you're not going to get the same level of creativity from right back. But I think if you can split that across the course of the team, I think Liverpool will have plans in place. And to be honest, it's not the worst thing to change something. Liverpool have obviously had Trent for a number of years, and teams have been able to work out how he plays and how Liverpool attack. To have a different problem, to have Frimpong there some weeks, Conor Bradley there, to have a number 10 in a more traditional sense, to have different threats in different positions, changing things up a little bit, it's probably not the worst thing for Liverpool in terms of just the first half of next season. I think teams are going to have to learn how to play against Liverpool again. Now, obviously, you can just sit back in a low block and create problems that way. But Liverpool have got threats in all areas. That's what Arne Slot said he wanted from the transfer market this summer. He said he wanted, I can't remember the exact phrase, but it was something along the lines of, we want to be able to score from all areas and give people new weapons and new things to think about. I think absolutely Liverpool have done that this summer so far.
Looking at these transfers, what would you suggest are tactical tweaks that we can look forward to next season with Liverpool? What are the stylistic changes that maybe have been brought in with pre-season as well, have been reported or maybe underreported at the moment?
So, we've not seen a huge amount of Florian Wirtz so far this summer. He didn't play against Preston. He's then played behind closed doors against Stoke City in a friendly, but we've seen, sort of 12 minutes of highlights of that. I think he played half of a game, did set up a goal, but there's only so much you can learn from that. I'm expecting to see a lot more of him against AC Milan in Hong Kong this weekend. That's the big tactical question. I think, obviously, Hugo Ekitike is going to come in. Is he the finished product? No. Is he someone that can come into the team straight away? I think possibly, but I would like to see a little bit of Florian Wirtz, maybe as a false 9, maybe as a number 10, maybe as a little bit of both at times. I think that's the big one, really, is the rest of the team will fit around him. Where he plays will dictate almost the rest of it. The fullbacks will change. There'll be a different emphasis in terms of creativity, but I think Florian Wirtz is the key, really, for me. If he's the 10 and you've got somebody in front of him, that obviously looks very different to if you've got maybe a similar midfield to last season with Florian Wirtz in front of it. it could go either way. I suspect we'll see probably a little bit of both from Liverpool next season, but pre-season and the summer, I think we'll see a few experiments, and that's going to be really interesting to see.
With Ekitike as well, I feel like it was a desperate... Obviously, Isak was the big name rumoured, but I feel like that was a desperate upgrade. I know that Nunez is creates his own problems for other teams, but it feels like one of those things where you could only stick with him for so long, and then at some point you had to kind of pull the trigger and say, look, we need to kind of move on from this, because it was severely kind of stagnating, or at least putting a glass ceiling on the Liverpool's attack, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, there's still question marks. I think there's a few people who've drawn comparisons that Ekitike's been at that level for one season, and that's kind of the same age and the same kind of profile to Darwin Nunez. But I just think he looks like a much more intelligent footballer, to put it kindly. I think there's a lot more to his game. I think he's not just going to be running offside a lot. He's probably going to miss chances. I think I'm right in saying his expected goals from last season wasn't particularly exciting, even though he scores 22. I think there was a scope to improve that, which I suppose you could flip as a positive as well. But I just think there's a lot more to his game, really. I think Arne Slot wants a number 9. Luis Diaz spent most of last season playing number 9, which I think tells its own story in terms of the options. He wants a lot from that number 9. It's going to take a lot of coaching, I think, to get Ekitike up to speed with it.
Pretty scary.
I think the Premier League are going to be very scared. But I want to talk about teams that maybe strike fear into the Liverpool fans when they play against you. What are the bogey teams or stylistic matchups that people should be aware of next season? Quite often when we look at these things, there's these games that are projected for Liverpool to definitely win. And then suddenly people are a little bit shocked. But maybe they shouldn't be shocked because they just have a history of turning up against Liverpool. Who are the Premier League teams that really do, have a thorn in your side at times?
There's probably a couple of obvious ones. I think Crystal Palace is one that they've often caused Liverpool problems, I think, in terms of counter-attacks. I mentioned before about the final few games of Jurgen Klopp were happening. They were one that came to Anfield and won and threw a bit of a spanner in the works. I think it is teams like that.
Istanbul as well.
Yeah. I mean, Liverpool, in fairness, don't have the worst record against them. But it's that kind of team where there's a bit of a counter-attacking threat. Nottingham Forest was a classic one last season. That when they came to Anfield and won, I think it was the second home game that Arne Slot had overseen. Obviously, at that point, we didn't know what season Forest were going to go on and have. So in the context of it, it doesn't look quite as bad as what it did at the time. But it's those kind of teams, really. I think that's the next interesting tactical evolution, really, for Liverpool in terms of Florian Wirtz, some of these players that they're bringing in the final third. I think the idea is going to be to pin teams in a lot more, almost a bit more sort of moving towards a Guardiola kind of very high line defensively, everybody push forward, lots of pressing, lots of keeping the ball in forward areas, and just minimising that counter-attacking threat as much as possible, because there were quite a lot of games last season where Liverpool maybe won by 1 or 2 goals and the margins were quite slim. Obviously, when you're a goal up and there's a little bit of nerves and possibly there's a couple of counter-attacks, that kind of team at a Palace, a Forest, at times maybe Fulham or teams like that. There's so many good teams in the Premier League that you almost go through the fixture list and think there's no easy games, there's no easy runs. But it's those teams which, if they've got a little bit of pace on the counter, maybe there's 1 or 2 weaknesses that you can get at. But maybe that's different. Jeremy Frimpong is absolutely rapid. That was the big takeaway from the Preston game. I couldn't believe how quick he accelerated. Obviously, Milos Kerkez is a lot faster than Andy Robertson. It's those kind of teams, really. But I think what Liverpool have done this summer is going to go a long way to mitigating that, I think.
On the opposite end of the spectrum, who are the teams that you know that you'll definitely get a result against, or at least a good performance? There's obviously the promoted teams, and it seems a little bit unfair to say, but we kind of know that the big teams are going to turn up against them next season. It's kind of 3 points guaranteed. But are there any other teams that people should be aware of that Liverpool just always turn up against?
I suppose of the bigger sides, the obvious one would be Tottenham. They tend to have a pretty good record against them. in the context of last season, it's not a huge statement because they finished so low down. It wasn't a normal season in any sense. But I think Liverpool have a very good record in recent years of being a bit of a flat track bully. The problem Liverpool had 10 or 15 years ago when they were trying to win that first Premier League title and overtake Manchester United and be in those conversations, they would go and win at Old Trafford. They'd beat United at home, but then they'd lose to Sunderland or they'd lose to Fulham, or they'd drop silly points in silly different games and things like that. I mean, that just isn't the case for Liverpool at the moment. Their record is very consistent. The lesser teams they do tend to beat. They've obviously then had big results against, they went to the Etihad and won. Arsenal, they managed not to lose at the Emirates. The lesser teams, Liverpool tend to do very well and tend to be very strong and very consistent. And that's kind of the basis, really. That's the big difference. Why they've won titles in recent years and didn't do it before is that consistency. So I'm expecting that to continue. And I think what Arne Slot would want is that a few of those games would be a little bit more comfortable. There was lots of 2-0s. I think there was sort of 8 or 10 2-0 scorelines where Liverpool maybe made it 2-0 on 70 or 80. If you can do that a little bit earlier and kill the game, I think that's the next step, really, to just make their lives a little bit more comfortable and let them take the foot off the accelerator.
What is a good season in the 25-26 campaign for you? What constitutes that? Is that another league title? Does it have to be a trophy? Or is it just kind of seeing these new players integrate in, transferring over from post Alexander Arnold, post Andy Robertson, and just seeing those players have a great season, but maybe not, measuring success in terms of trophies won?
I think the title is there to be won. I would say that. I think the business that Liverpool have done would probably scare their rivals more than what their rivals have done would scare Liverpool. I think the position that they're in is really strong. They're obviously an exceptional team. They've got lots of quality in different areas. There is a bit of a question mark in terms of have they done maybe a little bit too much in one summer and made too many changes, but I don't necessarily think that all of those players will go straight into the team straight away. I think Conor Bradley will be in the team ahead of Jeremy Frimpong to start with, for example. Ekitike, there's no immediate rush for him to go into the team if you've got Florian Wirtz who can play in that position instead. So I expect Liverpool to be right up there again next season. I think the expectation is that they will, if not win the Premier League again, they'll be very, very close to it, because I think I like some of the business that Arsenal and City have done, but I don't think it would put them in a position where you could make the argument that they would go into the season as favourites. I think Liverpool are favourites on day one. In terms of the Champions League, which is obviously the other main priority for Liverpool, I guess the priority is just don't draw PSG in the first round and they'll probably go a lot further.
Would you be most worried about Arsenal, especially because obviously they've got Zubimendi, which was kind of, obviously there's a horrendous stuff going on with Partey, but it's definitely an upgrade on that position. And then I feel like the striker is a big upgrade that was a massive, glaringly obvious error for the past maybe 3 seasons or so. And obviously they've come close a couple of times. Is that who you would be most worried about? Especially if they got Gyökeres?
I think so, yeah. I think Arsenal were obviously considerably better than Man City last season. There's obviously a gap for City to get to Arsenal before they can think about going for the title again. So Arsenal, I think, will be the closest challengers. But I think it's hard to argue that Arsenal's business overall has been better than Liverpool's business overall. In terms of there being that gap existing already. I still think Liverpool were in a stronger position. They've retained that stronger position. And obviously, we don't know what the impact of the Club World Cup is going to be as well. I mean, Chelsea are in a really good position, I think, with the squad that they've got and the players and the quality and the depth and all the rest of it. But it would surprise me if at some point in the season they and Manchester City didn't have a dip just because they've basically not had a summer. Obviously, Liverpool and Arsenal are in a slightly different advantageous position of having had a full summer and having had a full pre-season. I think that will make a big difference as well. So I think it'll be Arsenal and Liverpool most likely to win the league, but obviously from a Liverpool perspective, I hope it's Liverpool, but I think it's realistic to say that Liverpool would be the favourites. I think at the start of the season, which I don't think will have happened in my lifetime before, to be honest. Whenever they've gone for the title in the past, it's kind of not come from nowhere necessarily, because they went head to head with Manchester City for a few years. But I think on day one, when Liverpool kick off against Bournemouth, I think the expectation and probably the numbers would suggest that they are the team to beat, really.
You're narrow favourites already now, in terms of odds. I would be interested to see if Goycrest changes that. I feel like a lot of this is people just seeing that Liverpool won it last season. Like you say, seeing that not only have they managed to retain that status as kind of the best team in the league, but they've actually probably further cemented it, if not pulled away a little bit. So I don't know if Goycrest will change that. For me personally, I feel like it definitely brings Arsenal a lot closer, but I don't know if you can argue that they overtake Liverpool with that signing alone.
Well, I guess that brings us on to the last questions. Predictions for the season ahead. So first of all, where are you going to finish?
I think Liverpool will win the league. I do. I think there's a level of consistency, there's a level of quality that they've added. I know people will say, oh, Mo Salah's not going to have the same season again. I think if you said that to Mo Salah, I think you'd have something else to say about that. I think Florian Wirtz is the signing of the summer. I know Liverpool spent a lot of money on him, but I just think he's a top 10 in the world player. Like he's
22 as well.
He's an unbelievably good footballer. They've got the best balance. I think they've got the best attacking options, though, from this point until September the 1st, when the window closes. That could change and shift again. I suspect if it does shift, it'll be in a positive direction, but it's hard to say at this point. For me, you win the league, obviously, by not conceding loads of goals, but the team that scores the most goals tends to win things. And if Arsenal sign Gyökeres, obviously that will be an improvement and an upgrade. I don't think it's a game changer in the sense of Liverpool have got the quality options of their own. I would be surprised if Salah didn't hit 20 goals. You can see a scenario where Florian Wirtz doesn't get a million miles away from that, and then there's loads of others on top of that as well. So for me, Liverpool have just got that depth in attack. That's what made the difference, I think, last season, and that's kind of my thinking heading into this one, is that they're going to be right up there again, and I suspect that will be a big reason why.
And I think another thing that people need to be aware of when talking about Liverpool is how advanced a lot of the training techniques are, because you guys, I think, I don't know if it's confirmed, but you guys are still working with Zone 7, who are the AI kind of company who are really good at not predicting. They kind of say that there's biomarkers to be able to see if players are going to be near to an injury. And so somebody like Salah, each season we hear this narrative again, oh, he's not going to turn up, he's not going to turn up. And every season he's
too old as well.
Yeah,
but then
too old, and he blows everybody out of the water once again. And I think this is something that people need to be aware of, is that throughout the season, Liverpool are going to be managed by not just an amazing coaching staff and fitness staff, but they're also going to be aided by some of the best technology that the sports world has. And so Salah is going to be managed. He's not going to be risked. He's going to have maybe another great season because everything is just going to be laid out for him perfectly. So just a question to you, another kind of concluding one, is he going to be Liverpool's top scorer next season, or is Wirtz going to steal that mantle from him?
No, I think it'll still be Salah. I think Salah will still be the main man, but I think he will obviously be helped by having Wirtz teeing him up, and probably a more prolific striker as well. I mean, there was, I can't remember the exact numbers, but I think he got something like 23 assists last season. But when you think of the chances that were missed by a few of the players around him, that number could go up as well. I think that's the biggest change in Salah, really. When he first came to Liverpool, he was just purely about scoring goals, and he had no interest in anything else, really. But now he's much more rounded. His passing is unbelievable. Some of the assists that he's provided for his teammates, and I think having better quality around him should make that even better. But I mean, even if his numbers were to drop off, I don't think that they will necessarily. But even if they were to drop off, they're at such a high level. He's still going to be ahead of everybody else anyway. So yeah, I suspect that it will be a big couple of years for Mohamed Salah, and probably we spent the entirety of last season talking about, well, of course he should get a contract extension. Of course Liverpool have to do that. I think by next summer, there's a possibility, I think, that we might be having those conversations again.
Do you think that even the question is he's going to break that Premier League record again for goal involvement? Is that a possibility once again? Because like you said there, throughout last season, there was so many opportunities that were missed by teammates. And now you're probably getting one, maybe two players that can put those opportunities away. Is that the real conversation that we should be having? Not will Salah be where he was, but will Salah once again break Premier League records?
Yeah, the only thing that I would say would stop me saying for sure that he'd be right up there again is AFCON coming in the middle of the season. He's going to miss a few games for that. And the last time he went to AFCON a couple of years ago, he came back and he was tired. I think he had a little bit of an injury. He tried to play through it and it just didn't quite happen for him. After that point, he just looked shattered and wasn't able to hit those heights again. So maybe Egypt don't go all the way to the final, or maybe if he is able to manage his minutes a little bit better around that and Liverpool are able to be a little bit more careful with him. I know he wants to play every minute of every game, but I think maybe there might have to be a few sort of coming off. If Liverpool are 3-0 up at Anfield on 60, you just take the hit and say, you know what, let's just take him off and keep him fresh for later in the season. That's the only thing that I think will derail him. He's clearly still at the peak of his powers. He's an exceptional footballer and he's got all the technique and the quality to go again and do that. But AFCON is just that slight nagging thing in the back of my mind. Not that I think it will derail Liverpool, because I think they've got enough attacking options, but just in terms of his own numbers and his own level of performance, I think that possibly might be the reason that he doesn't quite hit the same numbers as last season. That's the only thing that you can sort of take away from him, really.
So throwing it to you, Sam, was there any last comments that you wanted to make?
Just that Liverpool, we kind of alluded it to before with the succession planning from Klopp to Slot. But one of the things and the reasons they've been so good is because they were so early to that data game, along with the likes of Brentford, Brighton. These kind of clubs and that data approach is partly the reason that numbers game even exists in the first place. That's kind of where we got that inspiration. One thing I loved about Liverpool, and this was in an Athletic long read, was that Klopp, I don't know if they still have this, but they had an exact replica pitch. They had two training pitches, one which was an exact replica of Anfield, the other was turned into an exact replica of whoever they were playing that week. So if you're going to Sean Dyche's Burnley, they grow the grass a little bit longer, they make the pitch smaller, and then they train on that kind of throughout the week to get used to it. And it's just those kind of the willingness to think a bit differently that has enabled the succession planning and the success and the transfers and everything over time. It's just, obviously, as a United fan, it's horrendous, but it's also so interesting to see. And aspirational really for all other clubs as well. And that's why I think Salah has been able to get on so long. I feel like that's why Slot's been brought in and just hit the ground running. It's none of these things are by accident. Obviously, Michael Edwards probably takes a lot of credit as well, especially for the fact that when he left, it seemed to kind of be in danger of falling apart, and then he comes back in and it kind of all just, hits the ground running again.
Yeah, I mean, Liverpool were ridiculed for having a throwing coach at one point, but then, at the end of
then
that
everyone
season,
has one.
everyone else has kind of got onto that bandwagon, and they're always a few steps ahead. There's, Jason mentioned the technology that they use and things like that. I'm sure there's things that they're doing now that we just don't know about yet, and in a couple of years' time, they will be revealed, and we'll kind of look back and go, oh yeah, that makes sense that they were doing that. So yeah, it's exciting, really. I think Liverpool are acting like a big club, which they haven't always done in my lifetime. I think they're very much they're at the top of the game at the moment, and I think Michael Edwards, as you say, takes a lot of the credit for that, but a lot of credit goes to Richard Hughes and various other people behind the scenes as well, and probably people that we've never even heard of who do those jobs and don't get the credit. But yeah, they're set up so well to go on and make the most of this, when City in a bit of a transition period and Arsenal having not quite made that next step. I think that's the perfect time, isn't it? You want to really kick on and make the most of it.
Well, Matt, all I can say is thank you so much for your time today. And even as an Arsenal fan, I can wish you the best of luck for the season ahead. I don't know if Sam can extend that warmthness as well. Though
we won't be close enough to even worry about that. So good luck. Doesn't make any difference to us.
But yes, a real pleasure to have you on today, and I hope everybody who watches the video from our side checks you out, and hopefully we have you on again in the future to talk about lots of positives about the Reds. But for now, thank you so much.
Cheers, Matt.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks.